happy to start asking questions.
Well, we are recording right now. Yeah. All right. So hi everyone. We are at Alluvium, but this is our first time doing this outside. And we are talking with one of the organizers and lead voices of a group called Spark and Sustain, which I think has the potential to be a really vital and engaging and encouraging force in our community. So we're with Roberto from Spark and Sustain. And Roberto, tell us a little bit about Spark and Sustain, your role within Spark and Sustain, your role as sort of a teacher, and I would even add to your title as a spiritualist.
Thanks. Yeah. Essentially, the quest for community and the things that we're meeting through community have brought us to Spark and Sustain. We have a little group. We started working on Spark and Sustain right when COVID hit, around the beginning of March. And the idea is that given that we come from so many different backgrounds in terms of our spiritual questing, and that there are a lot of non-affiliated people who are disenchanted with the regular channels of religious expression, we figured there's a place for all of us, those folks who are kind of unaffiliated and still questing and seeking to nourish our own spiritual longings. And so the idea for us is that we would support each other in our individual quests for meaning and purpose and belonging, and for also for assuming adult responsibility for the state of the world. Right. So simply put, we want to support each other's spiritual questing, and we want to support the desire in us to bring our love out into the world. That's what we focus on, and the spiritual channels that we all bring are so very different, and our experiences with formal religion, with experimental religious practice, spiritual and religious practices, they're so very different. But still, the common ground of we're in the 21st century, we're living here in this cultural context of the U.S. and specifically Western U.S., and specifically Oregon. So that gives us a lot of tools, right, for inquiry, for research, and for supporting each other. Yeah. And I think whatever tools we can bring to the table for building community, besides the idea of community as just people you see socially, but community is like the people who you cooperate with, the people who you share with, the people who you connect deeply with. That's more of the operational definition of community.
And I'm just going to pause recording because I think we're on to the verge of a very important point. But I'll pause recording while we let the train go by here. Recording. Okay, so I think you were on the verge of making some interesting points about spirituality, and we stopped because we're doing this outside for the first time, so I want to clarify that. And so I thank you for being patient. And with the Delta wave coming through, we're trying to, I think being outside was a good idea, but we all want to stay socially distant. I want to make sure people out there are staying safe as well. So, all right, so you were talking about sort of re-engaging spirituality in terms of its role in, I'm kind of recapping what you said, but maybe in terms of its role in self-actualization and defining personal missions, and also defining how those missions reflect on the community and reflect on the world at large.
Well, yes. And I think I'm much more interested in de-emphasizing the self-actualization piece, because I think we see a lot of that, like in the New Age movement in this country. It's lots about self-actualization and less about together actualization, which I'm very, very interested in. Like, I think it doesn't matter how enlightened I am personally, if I'm not connected to something larger than myself, who cares? You know, I'm sort of irrelevant.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that Spark and Sustain actually does really well, is that you're each pursuing your own missions individualistically, but you're all supporting each other and reflecting those missions in a small community of people. And also considering the community, local, and global impact, what you're trying to do with each of your missions.
Yeah.
How do you sort of we've encountered this a lot of Alluvium, and it's been a bit of a stumbling block for us. And I'm wondering how you deal with this problem. And that problem is that with each subsequent generation, people are becoming sort of less and less religious. And in some ways, that sort of reactionary response to religion is also reflected in people's attitudes towards spirituality. So much so that I would say a lot of the people that we've talked to in the community sort of denigrate the role that spirituality has and how they identify themselves. I like to try to encourage people to think of themselves as spiritual beings at least some level. What we're seeing a lot of is that people don't even want to talk about spirituality because that's sort of a religious um, uh, stain to that discussion, and people are so reactionarily opposed to religion that that sort of pollutes their perspective on spirituality. Have you found that to be a stumbling block? Probably less so for Spark and Sustain, but I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. So I think people's understanding of spirituality and religion, they're two linked up together, right? Um, and so you say spirituality and people hear religion, right? So it doesn't really matter. I think, and spirituality is such a clunky word to begin with. Like, I don't think we have the language for what we're wanting to point to and what we're wanting to create together. And spirituality has all this baggage, right, along with religion, that I use it and it's uncomfortable, right? Because I don't think until we define it together, it's going to be uncomfortable to use it with people. And I think really moving the conversation away from the word spirituality and talk about what's important to us, to you in your role, to me in my role, what's important to us that's behind the word spirituality. And I think it's about narratives of connection that inspire us to participate in being more loving, responsible adults. Yeah. Like, that connects us to life, to all of the systems that we participate in, right? The sense of connectedness and that we belong and that we feel that we are being called to participate in, not just be spectators. And that's what I really care about. Like, this whole animal self, that's a brain, a heart, a body, right? And some mysterious combination of all those things. Like, how does that self get inspired to get up in the morning and deal with the world?
And so, how do you do that? What is a way to make? You talked about making us into more loving versions of ourselves, beings that can express more love and get more motivated to be what we think we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Is that not a recap of Spark and Sustain and your mission, and how do you get people to do that?
Right. Well, I think people come into community to these questions from all different angles, right? From the skepticism to the like just feeling blah about life, to having positive experiences about narratives that still excite them, right? And the idea is that we're mirroring together these varied experiences. So if I'm having a great experience with, like, I'm in touch with my sources of inspiration, the things that nurture me, and I'm also in touch with how those things want to move out of me into the world. And somebody else is having a day where they're like, oh man, I've had a shitty 2 weeks. And I'm not in touch with any inspiration. We get to contrast each other's experience for each other. And that community cauldron, if you will, informs our experience. I get to remember that it's hard for some people, that they're not, charged up all the time. And when it's my turn, I get to be on the other side. And the other folks who are having a hard time, they get to remember, oh, this is a moment. This also will change.
What are some other advantages, like as you go through the world, certainly the goals of Spark and Sustain are goals that are really easily universalizable. To be loving versions of ourselves, to complete our missions, to be motivated. What are other sort of like motivations when you try to appeal to other people who go through the world and do the same things, but they're doing them individually and kind of siloed off? What are some other advantages that you propose to those people to say, this is why you should do it as part of our community?
Yeah, because I think people will have a greater impact. Like, I can do more with you than I can do by myself. And if I'm interested in impact, I want more collective inputs, right? And if I have a community of people supporting me, I have more resources, I have more intelligence, more wisdom coming in, more material resources, right? So whatever that course of action that I'm pursuing, it gets potentiated by being in community and being supported by it.
What do you see as the role between Alluvium and Spark and Sustain? We're kind of the house for where you all meet. What are some other ways that we can work together?
Yeah, I think from what I understand about your approach, you're not just the house, but the facilitator for all of these efforts to help us, for lack of a better word, kind of rise up out of our despair. And
I mean, I try to be. That's a very kind portrayal of what we're trying to do here.
yeah, so you're not just the builder, you're kind of helping lift up those efforts, right? Lift up our spirits as we're trying to get out of the hopelessness, right? Yeah, and I think Spark and Sustain wants to nurture that larger effort. Yeah. So we're happy to be like a little in the trenches, little group, trying to push that same song along, basically.
What are some other obstacles you found in Spark and Sustain, that things that make it hard to engage people, to get people to join the group, to move forward along with you?
Mm-hmm.
Certainly in the era of COVID, that's like been one of our biggest things, is we try to plan stuff and then we're a couple of steps forward and then we're 2 steps backward because something happens with COVID or the Delta variant or other things.
Yeah. So I think one thing is class, and comfort. I think the people I mostly engage with are middle class and upper middle class, and they're very comfortable. And so they have, even though they might have the same analysis that I do or that we might share about the current state of affairs, they're also kind of conforming to it and have succeeded in playing the dominant culture's economic game and cultural game. So there's a complacency there. So that's pretty big. That I would say is probably the major obstacle to getting more people in my network participating. Um, yeah, and the skepticism, the fear of cults, right? Yeah,
We've encountered that as well as Alluvium.
and I think because we're such an individualistic culture, also so many people have a lot of wonderful creative projects going on, and they're busy doing their creative project. So that's also a challenge. And I think the thing about Alluvium that's exciting to me is that you can actually be an umbrella for all of these projects and then figure out a way, and I would love to help with this, figure out a way of how to cross-pollinate all these projects.
Certainly a very difficult task, but people are here so passionately at Alluvium for so many different and in some ways disparate things they want to get done.
Yeah.
All of which they all want to be more loving versions of themselves, and they all want to succeed in their tasks. They all want to stay motivated, and they all want to engage with each other. And I feel like those four goals are really facilitated by Spark and Sustain. All right, well, any other thoughts that you want to give on Alluvium, on Spark and Sustain, on the community of Eugene, the times we're going through?
I would like
a lot
to
of different topics.
I would like to ask you questions. There's so much to talk about there. I'm kind of new to Alluvium, and new to you also. And I'm interested, I have like the big questions about the big picture and how they kind of funnel down into this moment in time and space. Can we start there?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, like I'm curious, given your analysis of the state of all the things that you're paying attention to in the world, like what's coming, if you can dare to predict a little bit about, given our major trends and trajectories, social and cultural trajectories, what do you think, where are we heading?
So I think the pendulum is swinging quite far away from religion and towards science. And I think that's one part of what Alluvium wants to address. The pendulum has further to swing, but my hope is that pendulums swing in both ways, in both directions, to different people at different times in their life. So my hope is that we will get people excited about the dirty word of spirituality and maybe even the dirty word of religion. And we don't have any religious ideas that we want to suggest to people. We want people to get excited about asking questions that are inherently religious. Why are we here? What are we supposed to be doing with our lives? So that's a really important thing. So, and the other thing that we want to do with that dynamic is, as the pendulum swings between science and religion and moves more towards science, we would like to get people more excited about adding a philosophical dimension onto scientific discourse. Science has had fantastic successes answering questions that religion has only postulated on, even since antiquity. And now even the hardest questions of religion, we're beginning to see formulations of answers from science. For instance, what is the ultimate fate of the universe? Where did the universe come from? Why is there something rather than nothing? These are all questions that in antiquity were so far removed from anything humans could guess about with experimentation that they became really religious questions. And now that science has some formulations of answers, let's not get rid of those formulations and ideas that science has, but let's add a philosophical dimension on them. Science has a lot of successes, but one of the things that I think has been sort of a little bit sterilized in the sciences is that we're not really reflecting on scientific revelations with a philosophical lens. And that's something that I do want to get people excited about. As I've pursued more work with Alluvium and the community and people who've engaged with us, I've realized that that's a fairly individualistic mission. I want to get more people excited about it, but I also want to potentiate their missions, which often have nothing to do with those things. So one thing that we have another neighbor who's it's really nice to be here in a community. We're in the Whitaker neighborhood, and I think the more I've been here, the more I realize that we are part of the community and a neighborhood here. But anyways, so yeah, I realize that other people don't necessarily share that passion for those particular missions, and there's nothing wrong with that. So some people come here searching for just a conversation, and they really want to navigate an emotional landscape. Some people just want to feed others, and that's how they get spiritual nourishment themselves. So we work super well with the Burrito Brigade, with the food pantry. So like you said, I'm a facilitator. I think I facilitate through the open stage, the open mic that we do here at Alluvium every Sunday at 7. But I also think there are a lot of things that I'm not facilitating super well too. And that's okay. Things like yoga, I don't really have a lot to do with the yoga community that's formed here, but it's a fantastic community, and it's still very spiritually nourishing, and it's still something that Alluvium ought to support. And I'm still proud to be a part of it, even if I'm not sort of like the direct driving facilitator. I'm just like, here's the space. So yeah, so you know, we want to facilitate my mission and facilitate other people's missions at the same time, and then keep the definition of what we're supposed to be doing here pretty broad at the same time. It's a lot of different challenges, and it's going to be challenging to see how we keep our identity as Alluvium going forward with all these disparate missions. But I think it's something that I'm really proud of, and I'm really motivated and energized to do. I hope that's a bit of an answer to the question.
Yeah, it's an answer. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. What what's the sense? What's the sense you have of the community building process? Like, and at what depth do you think it's happening, and if it's happening?
I'm really proud of the community that's formed here. I think there are definitely sort of silos that form regardless of what you're trying to do. But I think the successes that we've had have been to work with the Whitaker Community Council. Those have been great successes. Another area of success we've had is the things that we've done that are more altruistic or philanthropic. So there's a lot of organizations in Eugene, and frankly, there doesn't need to be another one, that feed, that work towards housing people who are unhoused, that take care of people who without resources. Those are great organizations. The tasks ahead of them are massive. But one of the things that we found that's been really nice is when we operate as a cooling center, or when we run our vaccine clinic, or when we work with HIV Alliance to do STI testing here, we are building relationships with all those organizations. So even if we are very hands off in some of those missions, these relationships are forming because of Alluvium, and that's something that I'm really proud of, and that's something that I want to keep facilitating insofar as I'm sort of have a bit of a more limited role in it. But so a community has formed here, for sure. It's formed in a lot of different ways and a lot of different identities. But I think those identities and those relationships are becoming more and more closely linked. And I think of each little relationship that forms between all the different organizations that use our space here as Alluvium, each one of those little links makes it a more rich tapestry.
Yes.
And it's a weaving together that happens slowly over time, and maybe it's happening at the periphery of each community, but it's happening, and we're really proud of that.
Yeah, I'm very excited by that. I see that happening.
And then another really nice thing that's formed here at Alluvium is the bridge between the housed and the unhoused community. So our open mic is really attended by a lot of different people, and a lot of different conversations occur at our open mics. And they occur between people who are housed, who come here with a lot of resources, and the people who are unhoused. And those people all bring similar passions, and there's a mutual respect that forms. And I think no matter how much you try and feed and clothe and provide resources for the unhoused population, I think there's a separate, different, and useful and more humanizing and dignifying virtue to saying, I'm really now going to sit down and listen to what people who are unhoused have to say. And that's one of the things that I'm really proud of that we've done, I think, particularly well at Alluvium. Just because we're lucky to be situated geographically where we are here in the Whitaker neighborhood.
Do you have some kind of specific forum for that, or is it just impromptu sharing opportunities?
It's grown largely out of our Sunday open mic. So we have a lot of people who are housed at our Sunday open mic. We have a lot of people who are unhoused. But it has grown intentionally as well, because it's something that we've prioritized and we want to pursue. We did have an event here called The Way Home, which was a really fantastic idea that was going to be basically a talent show that was going to feature the housed and the unhoused doing things together. We were really excited about that, and then the heat wave hit, and the temperature skyrocketed to 113 and shattered records throughout the West Coast. So we canceled that. We stayed open that day as a cooling center, and we used a lot of the resources that would have been devoted to that event to, just protect people from the tremendous heat. Now, and that is emblematic of a lot of what we have. We're trying to be better spiritual beings. We're trying to be more holistic beings. We're trying to preserve dignity, work together, and have events together. And bang, we get struck down by environmental catastrophes. We get struck down by COVID and the Delta variant, and there's terrible things happening in the world, and they're going to continue to happen, and a lot of them are ecological catastrophes. And so we have to counterbalance. What are we going to prioritize, and how are we going to take these ecological catastrophes and keep doing our mission in the face of them? It's not always easy.
Yeah, I'm imagining that community will also come from dealing with the conflicts and challenges of our time.
I hope so.
If people don't run away from it, that is.
I hope so too. There's a lot of challenges that we're facing. We're and I think in some ways those big challenges are environmental, and I would hope that I've always kind of hoped that Alluvium would have a green agenda to it. And we did offer some space to the Pacific Green Party to help develop some more partnerships. But there are definitely ways that I think we're becoming more green here at Alluvium, and ways that we want to advance the green agenda to make people more conscious of that. But there's a lot of tasks that we talk a lot about in our open mic. I talk a lot about transhumanism, which like the Ray Kurzweil singularity of how we are going to navigate fusing with our technology. It's happening right now all around us, and no one's really reflecting on the philosophical implications of that.
That's right.
So that's an interesting conversation that we're continuing to have here.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
More earthly question. How are you covering costs here?
We are not doing a great job of that. No, okay, that's a really good question. We are not doing a great job of that. We will probably at some point need more support from the community. I think there's a huge outpouring of goodwill from the community. And it's really a patchwork between everything that we're doing here, but we definitely do need the support. And there are a lot of really important logistical considerations to how we navigate getting support from people. And there's a lot of really important logistical questions to walking that fine line, because we are a church, we have a somewhat religious mission, and so we definitely don't want to steer too far in favor of asking people for money. I've been on the board of directors of many organizations, and it is a very difficult balance, because if an organization starts saying too much, hey, we need more support, we need more money to do our mission, it just becomes onerous, and people don't get as excited about supporting it. So we are going to have to navigate that landscape in a very careful way going forward. And we don't ever want all of our events here are voluntary, donation supported. We never turn anyone away at the door for our events. So if there's an Alluvium event happening here, we definitely want to let people in, and we want people to say, I don't have the $5, so I can't get in. We don't want that. So it makes it hard to say how do we keep a balanced budget. And we haven't struck a balance in that regard, but we hope to. And I think once our IRS paperwork is done, we may get more aggressive about fundraising. I'd hate to see that happen too much, though.
Do you have a fundraising team or people with fundraising experience on your team?
We do not. We do not. And we've been offered support from people who want to start writing grants for us more and who want to do more fundraising. We started the Friends of Alluvium Facebook group. And then we do have a lot of people who want to contribute more, who want to be a bigger part of our fundraising mission. And my role in some of that has been like, let's hold off a little bit. Let's navigate what we're supposed to be doing first. And then let's make sure we have a balance once we start saying, okay, we're going to open up the floodgates and say we need more donations. Good question. Good question. It's a very hard question, and we're not doing well on that answering that question right now. But I think because we're so young, and because we've just submitted our IRS paperwork, and there's so much other stuff going on, that it's okay if we don't really answer that question super well now. I think 12 months from now, we'll have a better answer to that question.
That was going to be my question: is how much time will pass before you really start to feel like, oh my God, we should be answering this, have an answer for this. Like, we have a year left of time to be sorting it out.
Yeah, I mean, I think any organization's budget in the first year is different than. No, no, you're fine. Any organization's budget is different for the first year. I think we have a lot of initial expenses that I don't think are going to be recurrent expenses. We invested a lot of money in building up our stage and being able to have a nice place. We're painting the church this coming week, so my hope is by a year from now we'll be pretty balanced, and then maybe we'll be able to put aside money for good projects and upgrades after that. It's an excellent question, a hard question to answer.
Yeah. Switching it over, how can we as Spark and Sustain support your efforts?
That's interesting. That's a good question. I think it would be nice eventually to have sort of a council of involved groups at Alluvium working together. So, I mean, have you ever met with some of the yoga teachers here, for instance? Some of the people who do some of the like food brigade people?
Yeah, I don't know specifically. I know a lot of folks who are participating in some way or other coming forward.
Yeah, I think it would be good maybe to, after the fall starts, to have an open house, and then say, let's get all the stakeholders who are part of Alluvium, who are under the umbrella to some degree, meeting together and talking with each other. Yeah. And I think that'd be really rewarding for me to have like a lot of interrelationships between the little siloed off groups that are here.
Yeah, absolutely. I have facilitation skills to offer in that vein if you ever want a meeting facilitator.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm happy to support that.
Yeah, and I think even just informally, just saying we're just gonna have an open house, and we're gonna open our doors at Alluvium, and let's get everyone together to like, you're the people who are here on Thursdays, you're the people who are here on Wednesdays, but let's get you all in the same room and have you having a beer with each other, or having a good conversation with each other.
Yeah, I get the sense that you're very much a proponent of informal, just bringing people together and letting them sort out the social interactions and dynamics.
Yeah, I think every relationship that forms here has been good for the organizations that are here, and also really good for Alluvium. But at some point, we are going to have to be a little more formal, and we've been holding off a little bit, but we're going to have some, some goals set out. And I do have a 5-year plan for Alluvium. We have strategic goals for Alluvium, and we're going to keep pursuing a lot of those things in a way that's, I think, very solidified. And at least we have something that we can move towards.
Yeah. So what about the Whitaker community? What needs are being met through the Alluvium organization for the Whitaker community?
Tangibly, we do offer the wellness clinic here every last Friday of the month and every second Sunday after that. So the wellness clinic is run by the Whitaker Community Council, but it's run with the space of Alluvium and with a lot of the resources that Alluvium provides. It's a fantastic partnership. And right now, the efforts of the wellness clinic are really very strongly focused on vaccinating. That is our goal that every other subsequent goal for wellness is predicated upon. But I think working with the Whitaker Community Council has been really wonderful. We hosted the election for the Whitaker Community Council here. We've hosted several of the Whitaker Community Council's board meetings here. That's been really fantastic. We house some of their resources. So that's been a really fantastic relationship. And then I think that it's a symbiotic relationship that's also very synergistic. the Whitaker community, if you walk up and down this street, just walk around this neighborhood, is fantastically diverse and very strange and very bizarre. And I think Alluvium has really thrived in this neighborhood, and that's just been by chance. But I'm very cognizantly and poignantly aware that if you took Alluvium and you plopped it down into any suburb outside of most cities across the United States, people would be suspicious. They would not have, there would not be there would not be many conversations. And so I think, as weird as the Whitaker neighborhood is, there are things about our mission that are, to me, very obvious, but to a lot of people, they're really like weirded out by, and so I think, just as we are serving this diverse community with a diverse set of communities that we are a hub for and a diverse set of resources that we contain, we also would not be able to survive were not for the oddity of the Whitaker neighborhood. I think any other place they want, are you a church or are you not a church?
Right.
Come in and be some Methodists and then we'll be fine,
Yeah.
right? But I feel like the Whitaker neighborhood is like, you can't just bring a normal church into the Whitaker neighborhood. People want something a little weird, and dare I say, Alluvium is a little bit weird. So there's a nice alliance that's formed because of that.
Are you hosting any opportunities for people to bring that conversation forward, the conversations about spirituality, religion, purpose, meaning?
Yeah, I mean, our open mic started with a very spiritualistic event. It's sort of devolved into like expressions of art, which are just as meaningful and just as wonderful, and we definitely want to preserve that. But what we've been considering is, do we need to have a spiritual roundtable? So do we need to have like a discussion time that's sort of more specifically earmarked for let's talk and philosophize? And we do want to do that. So I don't know if that's going to be a specific time, or we may refocus some of the resources to the open mics. I'm not sure how that's going to work, but I do think that's important and something we want to work on.
Yeah, like I'm wondering if people want to see how, or have a conversation about how the open mic and the other things that may not be so obvious, how they're serving some grander intention.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we could have a more specifically earmarked spiritual discussion forum that might be a good thing to have, and maybe it'll form in a separate time. But like I said, what I've been learning is my own definition of spirituality, which I think is very, a very obvious, plain definition, is not necessarily shared by people here. So when I see people here and they say, I feel like my soul is filled up from what I did here today, that is also a very, very holy and very spiritual and very important thing. And religion has become a dirty word, but maybe that's also an important thing from a religious perspective.
And mostly you're speaking about specifically music, right? Musical expression.
No, I think the people who've come for a lot of events have like, we had No Shame here recently. That was a theatrical expression. That was also really, people felt like their souls were filled up by that, and that was something that was said by a lot of people, and that was theatrical. And then when I talk to the people who are part of the food pantry here, who say it really fills my soul to be able to help these people when they're helping the community, that to me is something that's very spiritual. So it doesn't just have to be my definition, which is maybe a little bit more narrow.
Right.
So, but we're navigating that still. I do think it'd be nice to have a really like intense philosophical discussion session here. Our open mic usually winds down at around 10, and then after that, we generally have really interesting discussions about religion and spirituality. And a lot of those discussions have been what I've been trying to drive towards, and they're happening on their own informally.
You mean in individual groups after the open mic, not as a collective?
Yeah, so oftentimes at the open mic, I'll say, all right, this is your assignment for this open mic. Sometimes that assignment will be writing something down that's personal on a piece of paper, and we pass this piece of paper out for other people to read, and they're anonymous. Other times, at the open mic, what we've done is we've just said, go up to one person and introduce yourself to that person. And whatever you shared on stage, you have to tell that person one thing about what you shared. So a really interesting conversation had was there was a woman who shared a song who was a Catholic, who was raised Catholic, was raised very devoutly Catholic, who's bisexual. And she, after she got done with her song, she talked to people about what it was about, and it spurred a whole discussion. And that discussion was very poignantly directed towards religion, towards spirituality, to a lot of the harder concepts that I think it was like sort of harder and more definitive religious concepts. And that was really fantastic. And I was like, I could not have really planned for this. So yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, yeah, it is.
So people step up in a way and kind of go with their passion and
Yeah, and then
things coalesce around them.
Things coalesce, and it would be nice to have, like, say, like this is our philosophically insightful moment that we're gonna have.
Yeah.
But sometimes those moments happen when
That's
you don't
right.
plan for it.
That's
Well, I think that's probably about all the time we have. But I want to circle back to Spark and Sustain before we break down, and just so it's Sunday, every other Sunday.
Every other Sunday here at Alluvium.
Here at Alluvium.
10 o'clock, 10 to 12.
10 o'clock to 12:30, right?
12:30.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, if you can hack it the extra half hour, it's good.
You all sing a little bit together.
Right, we do a song, we do a gratitude moment, and then basically we just do a round circle discussion, where each person just checks in about how they're getting nurtured that week, and how they're giving their loving nurturance to other people.
So that's every other week, every other Sunday, 10 to 12:30. Spark and Sustain here at Alluvium. And I want to thank Roberto for joining me for a really interesting discussion. I think each one of these little discussions that we've done has helped me answer questions about what we're doing here a little bit more too. So
I'm grateful for you for inviting me and for taking this project on.
well, thanks very much. All right, and thanks everyone for tuning in. We're here every Sunday, 7 o'clock at Alluvium with our open mic. So if you have anything to say, come by and say hello. Hey Tim, how's it going? We're definitely in a neighborhood here. How's it going? All right, thanks everyone for tuning in.